Well, hello, friends. Welcome back to Commute Talk. It is a bit icy today. Had ice on the windshield that, like, you could watch it grow back in real time after I wipe it off with wiper fluid. Kind of pretty. Anyway, so today, Sean writes in. He's first asking about why I spent so much time in the beginning on Serenity, and if that was because I was implementing the standard C library from scratch, and is that what libc and ACK is about, or are about? And then he also asks if I had to start over with Serenity, God forbid, uh, what would I do differently? So thank you, Sean, for asking those questions. They are interesting questions indeed. So the reason that I spent so much time early on was because I had so much time to spend, not necessarily because of any specific part I had to work on. I did build the C library from scratch, and that is what libc is about. I think there are maybe 4 or 5 functions still that I've borrowed from some BSD licensed source. Other than that, it's homemade, and those functions are just things I aim to replace eventually. I just got lazy about it. But ACK is not about replacing the C library. It was supposed to be like a common C++ template and utility library that you could use both in user space programs and in kernel programs. And that's what it is. And I'm not exactly sure what it stood for when I made it. I mean, it's definitely inspired by this thing called WTF in WebKit, or the web template framework, um, which is, what they pretend that stands for. Which is it's like the C++ templates and utilities that can be used in the web engine or the JavaScript engine in that world. And I wanted to have sort of a similar thing where you could have the same C++ utility classes both in kernel and in user space. And that has worked out really beautifully, I think, because it's so nice that you can write code in the same style with the same containers and everything, whether you are in user space or kernel space. Although the heap allocations do get a little bit frustrating in kernel space, but that's more of a problem with the heap allocator there rather than a problem with the container classes. But yeah, so I'm still not sure what ACK stands for. I think originally maybe it was Andreas Kit or Agnostic Kit, like it's kernel versus user space agnostic. But now I just call it ACK. But then the second part of your question was, if I had to do it all over again, what would I do differently? And obviously that depends on if I can retain my knowledge and the things I've learned. If I can't, then I don't think I would do much differently at all. Although probably if I started now, I would have a lot less time to spend on it, so it would take me a lot longer, and it would probably end up quite different just because of that. Because there's only, like, motivation is a complicated thing. It's not entirely predictable, and it doesn't. I can't control motivation, so sometimes motivation doesn't work, and then I have to rely on discipline. And early on, a lot of my work on Serenity was motivated by just pure motivation. It was just coming out of me because I had nothing to do, and I just needed something to dump all of my obsessive energy into, and this was the perfect thing. But now, some days I'm highly motivated, but other days it does run on discipline. But the result is basically the same anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. But if I had to do something differently, and if I could retain things I've learned, I think I could think of a few things I would do differently. Like, originally, the kernel did not have threads. It had only processes. And refactoring the kernel to have threads, it was like, I could have avoided that entirely if I was just thinking of that up front. I don't know why I didn't. It just didn't come to me. So adding threads was a little bit of took a little bit of time to do later on, and it took me some time to get it right, and it's still not entirely right. And I would have designed that in from the very beginning, because now in the early on, there were not processes; they were called tasks, and it actually started as a microkernel. So the tasks had IPC, and they could talk to each other to coordinate things. And then at some point, I decided that microkernels it's too much effort and too little reward for my taste. So I just decided to go monolithic. And then at that point, I guess I could have converted my tasks into threads and then built process around those. But instead, I just converted task to process, which was a mistake. And then I ended up having to spend a whole bunch of time later on breaking up process into multiple threads. So I would do that differently for sure. And then another thing was that originally I built the GUI into the kernel because I didn't have any way of doing IPC in user space. And instead of spending the time to build a user space IPC layer, which I have now with Unix sockets, what I did instead was that I just wanted to get working on a GUI really fast, so I just did it in the kernel, and I did it by adding all these system calls that you could do. And you would ask the kernel, hey, create a window, the window manager lived in the kernel, and it was all very, very not very well designed. It was really crashy, but it did allow me to bring up a GUI very quickly, which I guess is what I wanted at the time. And so it's hard with those things, right? Because I find that a lot of my work is very much about finding motivation or finding discipline, or like conjuring discipline. And I kind of tend to think that when motivation comes by itself, I don't suck anything out of my discipline banks because I don't need to. I kind of like to not use my discipline banks if I can avoid it, because I don't know, I guess I'm a bit superstitious that they could run out or whatever if I take too much from it. Because I don't know, like discipline is like a battery, right? Like you can't just keep using it forever. You got to recharge it every now and then. And motivation is different. Motivation is like, it's like someone bringing a generator to your party, and like you can just plug your shit into that thing, and it can power you for you don't know how long, right? It depends on how much motivation fuel is in there. But when someone brings it, you know it's a party time. So you just plug in and put the speakers on and go. But discipline is different. So I do try to separate the way I act based on whether it's coming from one or the other. But yeah, so I would have spent the time to do user space IPC up front instead of taking the weird path of least resistance at the time and doing a GUI in the kernel, because I ended up having to rewrite all that code anyway. So yeah. What else? I guess then another thing. I mean, basically, I'm just saying things that I did one way and then ended up refactoring or rewriting somehow. But I guess that's how to answer this question mostly. Um, Although there's probably some meta things that I would have done differently too. Like I would have started recording sooner, for instance, recording videos, because I only started 6 months into it, and um, based on the response that I've been getting on YouTube and other places where I have shared my work and my content, it seems like there's a small but enthusiastic group of people who are interested in this type of stuff, and um, it seems that I'm filling a void in a market of sorts, because there was really no one doing this type of stuff. I mean, we used to have Terry Davis and Temple OS, right? But he had a very specific flavor to his content, and it was not for everyone. And I mean, I don't pretend to be for everyone either. Um, but, and I mean, no disrespect to Terry, but I know that some people had a bit of a hard time engaging with his content um, for various reasons, right? And I guess I try a little bit more just to be engaging. But people have different priorities, right? And I wouldn't dream of having him do anything differently than he did. I mean, he did his thing, and um, and I think he should be proud of what he accomplished. Anyways, um, getting off track here, but I would have shared more about my system at an earlier time, but I guess I didn't see the potential for that, and also I felt kind of I don't know, awkward or maybe insecure about talking to a camera um, and showing my process, because I guess like if you've never shown yourself working, it does seem a bit scary and intimidating, because oh geez, people are gonna see me messing up, and like they're gonna see me googling or looking stuff up or whatever, right? Like you build up this idea of how you're gonna be exposed as a, I don't know, mediocre, second rate. Um, you don't want you don't want people to see your flaws or your insecurities, and that whole thing is so stupid. And I know that now, and I see that now, but I couldn't see it then. Because everyone is flawed, obviously. It's so obvious. And you can say this, but until you understand it, they're just hollow words. And I feel like I finally understood. It's weird, but I like it. Anyway, I would have engaged with people sooner if I were starting over. Although I would be very wary of like announcing things that I'm gonna do. Like that's something that still I don't feel comfortable doing. That's why whenever people ask me for like, what's the plan with this, or do you plan on doing that, I always just say, I don't have a plan, because I am superstitious about planning. Like I do feel that if I commit to some plan by mentioning some plan, then it's going to take, a chunk of the fun out of it, because that's definitely something that I guess I became kind of fond of during my time at Apple, is this whole idea of surprise and delight, which is where everyone would work together to keep something secret until the demo day. And, for the public, that was often what you would see at like WWDC. And there was this agreement that if we can all keep things quiet and secret while we're working on them, then we can surprise and delight each other and the customers on demo day. And I think that mentality got to me a little bit. I do like that, although I like to keep a much, much shorter cycle on the surprise and delight. So I just prefer not to announce something before I actually do it, or before I have something to show, because I think it's just much more interesting when someone says, hey, I'm going to do this, and then boom, there it is, right? But that's just what works for me. If you are motivated by the other way around, like I know that for some people, or a lot of people, I guess, I know that for them it works better to say what they're going to do, because that makes them accountable to their plan in some way, and it really does seem to work well for some people, but it's not for me. Anyway, wow. I guess, like, as you can tell, probably I did not think about this before I started the video. I just figured I would work it out by talking through it. But yeah, I think those are like the main things I would do differently. I would build threads into the kernel up front, and I would do user space IPC instead of spending all that time building a GUI in the kernel. And then I would also start recording videos and sharing my work online sooner, because that would have been fun and interesting for people, I think. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question. Thank you very much for asking the question. I'm very happy to think about that and talk about that. I guess I don't spend enough time thinking about these things, so commute talk is like perfect for me. It's it allows me to think by talking. So thank you once again for that. And thank you everyone for hanging out on the commute, because it is really nice. I do like the format a lot. I hope you enjoy it too. And I have a bunch of questions in the backlog now that I'm going to try to get to. So let's see how we do with that. And other than that, hope you're having a great day wherever you are, and I will see you next time. Bye.